Hello everyone, I am Jafar, and today I'm going to talk about how to keep our self-managed systems secure as researchers. We deal with sensitive data, and therefore we must ensure the security and safety of our systems. So, how can we achieve that? To that end, I spoke with Neeraj and Jeff to obtain their recommendations. Let's see what they had to say about that.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Before we dive into the questions, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is Neeraj Menon. I am a master's student in the Electrical and Computer Engineering department. I also did my undergrad in Electrical and Computer Engineering.
My name is Jeff Kramer. I'm a master's student in Purdue's Electrical and Computer Engineering department. I'm set to graduate here in about a month or so. So I'm finishing up my second year. After that, I plan to get a position as a software engineer. And before coming to grad school, I also worked for a few years as a software engineer as well.
So, keeping our computers safe is one of the main concerns for the researchers who often deal with sensitive data. What are some practical steps they can take to keep their self-managed computers secure and safe?
So I understand that people do definitely want to keep their sensitive data safe. And if they are doing it on self-managed machines, the very first step that you want to take is to make sure it's secured with a password. And I understand why for some people that might be difficult because they see it as a hindrance. I say that you could look at it as an investment into security. And so by setting a password, and it doesn't have to be a very complicated password because a lot of people, they tend to think that passwords need to have special characters and lots of mixed up alphanumeric numbers like O, X, A, and no, it doesn't have to be that complicated. You can actually think of a password as actually a passphrase in that you don't use a single word for your password, you use multiple words in conjunction. And it can be an entire sentence that you set as your password. So you can choose a very short sentence. It could be something like, I like mangoes. And that in itself has a lot of characters distributed across. And then you could add a number and a special character at the very end of that string. So it could be, I like mangoes, 25 exclamation mark. And you can rotate that and keep setting it to whatever you want. And it'll be very easy for you to remember because it's just a sentence, a number, and a special character. And that is sort of the general rule that I have for my passwords. So I stand by that, and it's kept me safe all these years. And I think that's a pretty good idea.
So I hope I like mango is not your password.
No, it is not my password. I just made that up on the
spot. Okay, great. Yeah.
Nowhere close. But it is definitely easier to remember, and that's what people are concerned about, right? They don't want to remember a 16-character long alphanumeric password. And so what ends up happening is they're told to create a secure password, and in order to make it easier to remember, they only set about 5 or 6 characters. But the thing about that is a lot of hackers, they use brute forcing techniques, which means that they will try every single combination. And if your password is only 5 or 6 characters long, there's not that many possibilities for them to try. So just by increasing the length of your password and just throwing a few characters into the mix, maybe like, as I said earlier, the numbers and special characters, that alone makes it very hard for that password to be cracked.
So the first thing that's coming to mind is password managers. So the reason to use a password manager is that they allow you to generate a unique password for any website, any account, and by using unique passwords for each account, if a single one were to be compromised, then only that account would be effective, and it wouldn't affect other accounts that, otherwise maybe you would use the same password for everything. And so that's probably my first suggestion, is to use a password manager. And I'm pretty lazy, so I like to set up with that password manager. When I select one, I will take into account how easily it integrates with my phone's browser, with my computer's browser, with any other devices I might be using. I make sure that they have fairly easy to use, browser extensions, mobile applications, etc. So that when I go to actually use it, it's not as much of a hindrance. Of course, it is naturally easier to use the same password for everything. But given the risk that poses, it makes sense to use different passwords for everything. And so password managers just make that process a lot easier.
Well, speaking of password managers, would you mind sharing your own experience using such tools?
Yeah, of course. So um, I think the first one I used was Chrome autofill. And I think one of the bigger motivators for them to create that was just to simply save your password so you didn't have to remember them. But they did add, or they have a feature to suggest a randomized password. So it has that security element to it. And I found it really convenient because Chrome is pretty much my browser of choice. But I found that for mostly for mobile apps, Chrome autofill didn't work well. So if I had like a banking mobile app, I found it difficult to get the Chrome to autofill in those apps. And so that made me look for an alternative solution. And so I think I switched to, it's called 1Password, is the initial one that I used. And so they had integrations with browsers. You had to download kind of a browser extension, and then they had a mobile app, and it sort of worked, but the price was kind of expensive. I think they actually increased their price, and that's what made me change. And when I looked for another possible solution, I looked at Apple autofill as well because I have Apple devices, but it was kind of similar to Chrome, where it only works. That one in particular only works on Apple devices. So if I'm using another device, it just doesn't work. And so the one that I've settled on now that I think is best because it offers a lot in the free version is called Bitwarden. And that seems to be by far and away the best free solution for password management. And so the nice thing is it works on my desktop, it works in my browser as a Chrome browser extension, it works on my mobile device with the mobile app, and then I have even gotten it to autofill passwords within mobile apps themselves. And so it can be painful to set those up, to be honest. But the biggest motivator for me is that I don't have to remember passwords anymore. And I know that they're all secure because anytime I go to create a new account, I can have Bitwarden generate that unique password. So I would say it's very much worth it, even from a practicality. I hate having to remember passwords standpoint. It's really nice to have that set up. So you kind of get a 2-for-1 almost with setting up a password manager.
Then I asked Niraj about using antivirus software.
So for the most part, Windows and Mac OS already have a lot of default protections against harmful actors, bad software. It really comes down to how you import software onto your computer. So if you're on a Windows computer, typically it has always been the case that you would go to a website, you would download the software, and for the most part, it is safe to do because you are downloading from verified publishers, people who are famous. So things like Microsoft or Google or any of the obviously big tech companies. If you're downloading software from them, you have this assurance that it is safe. And and then obviously for that software, you don't have to worry about that much. But if you are downloading a program from somewhere that you have not seen before, there are a few things that you can check when you're installing those programs on your own computer. And the first and foremost thing, maybe on Windows at least, is there is this thing called digital signatures. And so when programs are distributed by a trustworthy company, they will always digitally sign those programs. So when you double click the installer, when you have it come up and you install a specific program, it is going to give you a warning, or it's going to give you an error saying something like this program was not verified by its supposed publisher. So if you have a program that says something like unknown publisher, you should tread with caution, unless it's a program that was designed by your peers. So digital signatures, it's a thing that like costs money. And so if you're a person developing a program for other people, you might not necessarily have that money to pay for a digital signature, in which case it's perfectly fine. You know the person, and if they are giving it to you over a secure channel, that is, if they are using something like FileLocker, and that's Purdue's service for securely transferring files from one computer, from one user to another.
Yeah.
Or you could use Google Drive or something with the capability of ensuring that the file that you send will be received by someone who has that specific email address. So with Google Drive, you know that you can share it with a specific email address. And and that trust comes from the fact that that email address belongs to that specific person. So when you send a file that way, that could be a way of like ensuring authenticity. And this is the lowest rung of the ladder, is if you're dealing with software from some random website, if it's not digitally signed, if it's not made by a person that you don't know personally, that is not a safe bet. And that's something to avoid as much as possible.
If you're not confident in the identity of whatever website that you're visiting, that you're about to download something from, or something like that, then obviously I wouldn't engage if it's from an email or whatever.
Thank you so much. And anything regarding the firewall?
Firewalls are not usually a major concern when you are behind a network as secured as Purdue. So when you are on campus, there are a lot of layers to the network security here. So you are not as likely to get hit by people who will make intruding connections to your computer. And so it is good to have it turned on always, just in case. You never know. Maybe someone's doing security research and your computer was the one that got hit. So in any case, it's probably good to have the firewall turned on just in case. That being said, as long as you are on a corporate network where the firewall is, there are already external firewalls to ensure that people outside the university cannot hack in. And that's my understanding of it. You should be pretty safe on an on-campus network.
Sure.
So yeah, it's not as crucial, but I think it is always safe to have it turned on just in case with the default settings.
Well, is there anything else that you want to add?
So I think a big thing is like scams, and you see it a lot of times in your Purdue email. Someone's always trying to sell a baby grand piano or a Steinway or something. And usually that happens because of things like phishing scams. So what happens is someone will duplicate a trustworthy looking website. So say they might copy the Purdue login mechanism to a new web page, and it looks exactly like the Purdue logins page, but the URL is completely different. And so that's why it's very important. So any website that you visit, any link that you click, you should always look at the URL to ensure that it has at least the domain name purdue.edu. A lot of the times they may make use of things like misspellings. So it might say purdued.com or purdue.edu. Well, edu, it shouldn't matter too much, but a lot of the scams it's very easy to get like a domain name on the .com. And so that's usually a big problem because you know that an institution like Purdue belongs on the edu domain, and anything that comes from Purdue should therefore come from the purdue.edu website. So that's also a big thing to think about. But coming back to phishing scams, so what ends up happening is you try to log in, and then it takes that information and then it'll redirect you to the website to make it look like nothing went wrong.
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't know that your credentials were stolen because you put it in and then it never like said 404 or indicated somehow that the request was invalid. And then the next thing you know, you're getting 10 emails from your coworkers next week saying, "Are you really selling a baby grand piano?" So that's something to be thinking about whenever you receive email. There obviously is the Cisco spam filter, but it's not perfect. A lot of the spam that comes is also coming from Purdue emails that were compromised because they fell for the phishing scams. And so they forward this information and they put in their own links. And you think it's safe because it's coming from someone you think you might know, or at least some sort of Purdue employee. But obviously that's not the case. And so in addition to making sure that like if there are links, if you are of some opinion that it might be legitimate, most of the time it's not. But if you think it might be legitimate, always look at any of the links before you click on them. There is a way to copy the link provided in the email, and that should tell you the URL that you're going to go to. So if it doesn't say purdue.edu, it's likely not a safe website.
Yeah, the rule of thumb is
Yeah.
don't click links in emails unless you're very sure that it's an internal email. A lot of organizations, Purdue just implemented this, I think, this school year, where if you're emailing anyone outside Purdue, it will just say external email at the top. And yeah, with any external email, I wouldn't click on pretty much any links. So if it's not something, if there isn't a good reason that I'm getting this email and
Yeah.
that someone is contacting me about this, whatever it might be, then I usually just don't engage.
Sure.
So yeah, I guess it's maybe a little about developing a sense of the tactics that are out there, and just being risk averse is always a good posture to have towards this. So if you don't know the person, it could be legitimate, but if you don't know them, I wouldn't engage with it. That's how I deal with scam emails, even phone calls. I'm basically to this point. I'm to the point where if I get a phone call from a number that is not in my contacts, I will not answer it, and just default to, if it's important, they'll leave a voicemail.
Sure.
So that's obviously not as much on the computer security side of things, but I think with emails it's the same thing. If you don't know the person and there's not a good reason you're receiving it, then I just wouldn't engage.
So have you ever heard of any experience that some people had regarding these scams?
Yeah, I know there's quite a few different ways to scam people out of things. One that I will repeatedly get from my bank, they'll put out a high alert, like I don't know if it seems like the scam organizations, like their attacks like come in waves. Like they'll pick a certain organization and call everyone on, I don't know if they have their customer list or something, and just call and email all of them. But that seems to be the case because my bank will periodically put up a warning that says like, high alert, we're getting reports of a lot of scammers. One of the most common ways now, thanks to two-factor authentication, is that it makes it very obvious when a scam is occurring if anyone asks for that code that's sent to your device. So there is no reason ever that someone else would need to know the code that's sent to your device. So if you have that posture if you have that like golden rule that you follow, like never give these codes to anyone, then in theory, your account would never be compromised because they wouldn't have that code, even if they had your password.
Sure.
Of course, if they have your password, it's still good to change it. But that's the nice thing about two-factor authentication is that it does act as a good last line of defense. If all else fails, just never give anyone those codes, and that can be a good practical step to protect yourself.
Thank you. Well, is there anything else that you would like to add regarding the security and keeping our computers safe?
Authenticator apps are becoming more common. So there's like Microsoft Authenticator, there's Google Authenticator, which I use personally, that will remove the need for text message two-factor authentication, which SMS messages have been shown to like it's an older technology, so that messaging channel can be compromised itself. So authenticator apps are now for a lot of tech companies, their recommendation is to use an authenticator application rather than just your phone number. But I would say, yeah, like authenticator apps are the better, more secure route. So I would say those two steps alone will go a long way in protecting yourself, along with the risk averse approach to emails. If you get an email from someone and you don't recognize them, I just wouldn't engage with the content. And the other tip too is that almost always, I'm not sure why email clients allow this, but they allow the email to be hidden by a name. So it could be like, I don't know, some company name or something that they're posing as. Yeah. But in most email clients, if you can't see the actual email address that it's from, you usually can click a drop down and see the actual email. And almost always it'll be a random string of characters. And the important part to pay attention to is after the @ sign is called the domain name. So like gmail.com, yahoo.com. If that domain is not a domain that you recognize, if it's not amazon.com, if it's not google.com, if it's not, whoever, that's another very strong indicator that that the email could be a scam. And then the other caveat to that is obviously with Gmail and Yahoo, you recognize those domains, but anyone can make an account on those domains. So of course those accounts for those popular email domains like Gmail and Yahoo and Outlook, those could still potentially be scams, but in many cases it's like some domain name you've never heard of, and in that case it's almost certainly a scam.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today and for your contribution to this conversation.
Yeah, no problem.
There are also some additional recommendations for managing your self-managed computers. Encrypt the hard drive using whole disk encryption for all drives in the system. Apply software security updates every 30 days. Install antivirus software and ensure the definitions are up to date. Run regular antivirus scans. Require the laptop and desktop to lock after 15 minutes of inactivity. Enable host-based firewall. One more thing. I've frequently seen people leaving their laptops open in public places, especially when they want to take a break. It is highly recommended to always take your laptops with you. Thank you for watching and listening to my tutorial on keeping your self-managed systems secure. I hope the shared tips and strategies will help you protect your systems from potential security threats. Remember, staying vigilant and proactive in securing your system is crucial in today's digital age. Once again, thank you for your time and stay safe out there.